Welcome to the new hit podcast, The Right Path, where being an author, an actual author, still matters. This is the podcast that's for authors, it's about authors, and it's done by an author, where we share our journeys, we explore our creativity, and we examine the why behind it all. Our guest today, folks, is an incredible guy who I've already had a great time chatting with. He is a lifelong resident of Pittsburgh and a Pittsburgh fan, and I think that needs to be said because we have to establish, what we're doing here. And but more important than all that, he's an author, and he's the author of the book Dissension. Folks, the story behind this is going to knock your socks off. It made me smile. It encouraged me to go pick up some of my stuff and get working on it again. Please welcome to the podcast, Rodney Phillips. Rodney, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing terrific, Rory. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, absolutely my pleasure. I tell you what, normally I ask folks to just go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about them. I gave a little bit away with the Pittsburgh fan thing. I
Yeah, yeah.
apologize.
Oh, no
Tell
worries.
tell everybody a little bit about Rodney, who you are and get us started.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh. I've been here my whole life, as you had mentioned, and one of the things about Pittsburgh is you and I were talking before the show is you're either a Steelers fan or you're not, right? You leave.
You move.
Yeah, so lifelong Steelers fan. Obviously, both my kids were swaddled in a terrible towel. Wouldn't let the nurses touch them once I got cleaned up until we got them into the towel. So that's kind of a tradition here in the hospitals. But yeah, so born and raised here in Pittsburgh. I work in pharmaceuticals in oncology. And I started writing this book when I was 19 years old, and it sat in notebooks for 37 years until both kids went to college. I coached youth football and boys and girls lacrosse for over 20 years, and I wasn't coaching anymore. And my wife said, "You got to find something to do on the weekends," because I was used to leaving early Saturday and Sunday and being gone all day coaching. And so I said, "Well, I might pull my book out." And she's like, "Are those all those notebooks that we've been carrying around?" I said, "Yeah, the ones in the file cabinet." She's like, "I don't care what you do, but find something to do." So I started writing Saturday and Sunday mornings. My wife calls me the weekend writer. So I basically make an appointment with my book, and Saturday and Sunday mornings if we don't have anything else going on, and grab a coffee. And it took me about 2 months to get the book from the notebooks into computers because obviously when I started writing it, we didn't have the computer. But and then 37 years later, I'm 56. My book got picked up by a publisher and it's out there.
Wow. I mean, and there's so much in that story that you just gave. I mean, there's lots of details in there that we got to unpack for folks. The let's kind of just start with the journey, of this book because, like you mentioned, you and I are very similar in age, and when we were
Yeah.
19, there were no computers. It was it was pen and paper. But you started this when you were 19 years old, and it literally just sat for 37 years
Yes.
till you found it again.
Yes.
So, did you always know it was there, and were you thinking about grabbing it, or did it kind of take you by surprise one day when you were done coaching?
Yeah, so over those years, I had grabbed it a couple times and tried to get into it. And I'll tell you what didn't work for me. And you're a fellow author as well, but from my perspective, what didn't work for me was just grabbing it occasionally and saying, "Oh, I might write, I might do this, I might do that." What then speared me to do this was that dedicated time, and I feel like it's just like, when our normal jobs made it a job, and I have an appointment with my book, and I would just show up for the appointment. And that helped me out dramatically because before that I'd pulled it out, probably over the years 6, 7 times and never really got that far. I had to, go back and read what I'd written, things of that nature. So I would say that dedicated time and really putting that emphasis that, yeah, this is what I'm doing, changed my perspective.
Yeah, I love that. And you've mentioned a couple times that you made an appointment with the book. I love the phrasing. of that. I mean, I've written in much the same way. I kind of have to sit down and get purposeful
Yep.
and dive into it a little, sort of let it absorb me a little. I can't just sort of come and go and pick and peck and that kind of thing. When you made your appointment with your book, this was on the weekends in place
Yes.
of, again, when you would normally have been coaching. So,
Yeah.
when you thought this through during the week, was it kind of always gnawing at you and you'd come up with little things? Or, I mean, how was your process between weekends?
Yeah, so I'm glad that you asked that question because, and I think it's an excellent question. So during the week, I use notes on my cell phone. So as I'm out and about, doing things, and something pops into my head, I throw it into the notes section of my cell phone. And then when I, get there on Saturday, I'll go through the notes that I put in, and some of them plug into different chapters that I've already worked on. And you and I have discussed that the publisher had me start the sequel in April, so I've been still writing on the weekends on with the sequel. But I still do the same thing, like an idea will pop into my head or a dialogue or, anything like that with a couple of different characters, and I throw it into my notes. And then I follow up on the weekends with what I have during the week. And I feel like that process kind of works for me the best, because during the week I'm kind of free to kind of explore the thoughts and the characters as the day's going on. I have a lot of windshield time with my job, so I'm either thinking of that or I'm listening to podcasts or, things of that nature. And obviously, I'm a big NFL guy, so I listen to NFL Network as well. But yeah, so I think that process has really worked for me, where I take the notes during the week and then I, focus on Saturday and Sunday.
That's great. We're going to come back to the sequel, of course, but I do have to stop just for a minute and say congratulations because when a publisher says I want a sequel, that's not small. So
Yeah.
that's fantastic. I mean, really, congrats.
Thank you very much. It was out of the blue, and it's funny because before this book, I'm not an author, right? I am now, obviously,
Oh
but
yeah.
I wasn't. And the girls that were working on the book that were editing it at the publisher, we had a virtual call, and the one girl said, "Hey, I'm just going to come out and say this because we have a pretty good rapport." And I'm thinking in my head, they're gonna rip it apart, right? and
Right.
and she's like, "We really love your book. We love the characters. We love the storyline. Do you have any ideas for a sequel?" And I said, "Yeah, I got like two or three," and I threw them out there. And then one of the other girls said, um, "We think that you absolutely should start writing that now." So I went and told my wife after the call, and I'm like, "You're not gonna believe what these girls just told me," because I thought they were gonna tear me apart. But it turned out to be very positive, and I actually, have a couple ideas that I'm working on. So it's been good.
With that lead in, I would have thought the same thing. I would
Yeah,
have been like, here it
that's
comes.
what
They're
I was
buttering
like.
me up.
Yep, they're buttering me up to hit me, right?
Right. Exactly what I would have thought. That's fantastic, though. The Let's get back to your process just for a minute, because again, you're doing the weekly thing. Do you
Yeah.
have a set time that you sit down and write for? Like, hey, I'm going to write for 3 hours and then I'm done, like an egg timer thing, or is it whatever comes out, and it takes what it takes?
Yeah, it really that's another excellent question, Rory. Is it really is takes what it takes. And I'll go from anywhere from 3 hours. A couple Saturdays, I was up over 6 hours. My wife came and checked on me, make sure everything was going. But you know this, being a fellow author is once you get some ideas flowing and you get into a groove, if you don't have anything planned, I just, get caught up in it. You know what I mean? And I'm proud of the characters and I spend a lot of time, obviously with them, but it's really cool. And I'll tell you, I did a book club, I guess probably now 3 weeks ago, and it was with ladies that I coached their sons at lacrosse, and my son played lacrosse as well. And they had a book club. They used my book as the book. And the passion that they had for my characters, I came out of there, I mean, on a high. I can't even explain like the feeling that I had after I spent about 2.5 hours with these ladies. And and they were asking me all kinds of questions about the journey, the how I came up with certain characters, asked me not to kill off certain characters in the sequel, things of that nature. But it was really really overwhelming, and it was excellent. I would love to do book clubs, because the passion that some of these folks have, it really makes you feel good. Because obviously, even my bad characters, they're close to me, right? Because I created them, and that whole 9 yards. But to hear them talking about them was incredible,
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it.
Rodney, I got to tell you, that's a huge testament to the writing itself. Because and I've encountered this when with my podcasts and books. It's that when I coached kids, because I coached like you did forever, all three of my kids.
Yeah.
When parents get to know you as a coach, they can have you as a baseball coach and then recognize you as a football coach. Although that's fine.
Yeah.
But then they see you as a baseball coach, and then they realize that you are a writer or that you are a podcaster, and they're like, "Nah, I can't put these pictures together."
Yeah.
And so very often you get like typecast. These people knew you personally, and your book was so strong and your characters were so good that they just accepted you as an author. Huge,
Yeah, yeah, very,
huge.
very humbling, right?
Yeah,
And it's funny. I had a girl that I went to high school with, and obviously I graduated a long time ago from high school. But she's like, "You're the most cultured football guy I've ever met." Was her comment, because blown away by me now being an author, So it was kind of cool, cool
that's
moment.
really cool. I love hearing that story. Of course, we're still unpacking because I have a zillion questions about all this. So you start writing this when you're 19.
Yep.
Now, at this point, you're 56, you have the finished book, you have very well developed characters. I mean, the cover looks great. The story's obviously wonderful. You got a sequel coming. I mean, everything's worked out. At 19, was it just the basis and the idea? Had you started building the characters already? Because my goodness, we are such different people from
Yes.
19 to 56, brother. I
Oh, oh, absolutely. So I
mean,
did
yeah,
I did start building the characters, and I probably had, if I'm guessing, 60 some chapters, I would say, already in the notebook. And then I had a bunch of other notes. So, funny story how I started doing this. So I was in high school, and I liked to write, right? But I was a sports guy, and but I was working at a furniture store in the stock room. So basically, I was loading furniture when people came to pick it up, when I was a teenager. And a lot of downtime, a lot of boredom. So I had the idea for this book in my head, and granted, like the storyline, like the backbone of the story. So initially, I started using these overstock tags that we had in the stock room, that we would tag furniture for like layaway and stuff like that. And I started putting notes on the back of those. And then it graduated to, I started bringing in legal pads, and I wrote on a legal pad. Then I got a 5 subject notebook, and I started adding stuff into that. So I had this stack of like random things, where I had ideas everywhere. And when I went to transfer it into the computer, obviously I put everything in. So initially, all those like note cards, I just loaded them in, on a page, and then the chapters that I had already written, I put them in as is. Whatever I had written, I typed in, and then I went back and looked at what I had, and some of it I had to upgrade to, how we are now. Like I added cell phones, and
wow,
in the story I added fentanyl, because it's about two rival drug cartels, and a girl. It's set in Pittsburgh and Miami, and a girl's going to school for criminal law at Miami University. She finds herself caught in a war that breaks out between two rival drug cartels. She starts getting hunted by a hitman from one of the cartels, doesn't know why, and I'm not going to give it away, but then you'll find out why she is specifically being targeted.
interesting.
And her growth arc is pretty extreme, because she goes from a regular college student to, hey, she's running for her life, right?
Right. Wow.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
Okay. So at 19, though, you're recognizing things like growth arc,
Oh,
and
no,
putting
no, no,
this in.
no. I
Okay, this is
recognize
later.
authority. Yeah. When I
Okay.
started to, edit it and write on it now,
Hmm.
well, actually last year, then I started recognizing things like that. And I got a couple books. Actually, I have the one is the emotional thesaurus. The other one is writing believable characters. And my third one that I just recently purchased is a master list for writers. So those are kind of like three books that I'll reference things, if I want a character. Um, so the other thing that I did, recently that I didn't do at 19 that I think really helped me was I created a little like synopsis of each character, small things like height, weight, eye color, hair color, things of that nature. But then I also went a little bit deeper and I want realistic characters. So all of us have flaws, right? All of us have bad habits. All of us
Yeah.
have, nobody's perfect. So that's kind of like how I outlined my characters was, okay, here's their positive traits. What are some negative traits? What are some flaws? What are some bad habits that they may have, things of that nature. Um, so I kind of when I started revisiting the book after I had loaded everything in, that's when I kind of delved more into the characters. And I'll tell you, two authors that really I really enjoyed growing up were Patricia Cornwell and James Patterson were probably the two big influences on me. Patricia Cornwell, like I loved her character development, and you could almost close your eyes and see those characters, right? That she does with Kay Scarpetta and some of the other ones. And what I liked about James Patterson is he has a lot of like shorter chapters that keep that story flow going.
Mhm.
When you've looked at Dissension, I have a lot of small chapters that really, because there's a lot going on with two cartels, right? And then I have my
Right.
main character and I have the FBI. So having those short chapters really keep the reader engaged. And that's a lot of positive feedback that I've got from, people that have read the book is we love the short chapters. And one of the ladies we were talking at that book club, she said, I've lost sleep because of you. And I'm like, what? She goes, because I'll look and it's only like 2 pages for the next chapter. And I'm like, yeah, I'll read those 2 pages. And then she's like, 28 pages later, I'm still up at 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was pretty funny.
That's
Uh,
a great compliment.
yeah, yeah.
All right. So they're saying it's a page turner and they can't put it down. These are good things to hear when you're an
Yeah,
author.
yeah,
Oh my goodness. I love the way you describe building out the character. And I think I mean, I've heard the process before. People who write fiction, I think that's one of the things they have kind of the hardest part with, and I think one of the most overlooked. They just go, "Oh, here's Sally. This is my person," but they
yeah,
don't like build the character and their life and everything about them. And
yeah.
did you learn this along the way, this process of building out the character? Or,
Yeah, I really learned it along the way, read a lot of things, looked at different stuff. I follow a couple people on TikTok. I also follow a guy that cooks on a Blackstone. So I like to cook on the Blackstone, so I follow him a lot.
there you go.
But yeah, so basically kind of learned it along the way. And I went back and enhanced some of the stuff that I had originally that was in the notebooks,
Mhm.
because a lot of that original process, once I had it loaded in, was really going back and rereading what I had, changing some stuff, editing it, adding in some nuances that are nowadays, right, that weren't in when I was 19. So I think my growth arc over this process has been tremendous, because I really, looked at myself as, you know, how can I um, do better, right? And as I read a chapter, I would sit there and think, and I'd love to hear your process as well, but I'd sit there and think, okay, does this chapter hit me? Like,
Mhm.
am I at the end of the chapter and I'm thinking, man, I want to keep reading? Or am I at the end of the chapter and be like, it was just filler, you know? So I really questioned myself as I was going through this process, you know. So I'm very proud of the fact that if I wasn't feeling it, I changed it, you know. So you know, is that something that you do similarly?
I tell you what, some of this I do, some of this I don't, unfortunately, and I need to start. But no, but I love the rereading part. That's something that unfortunately I probably get a little too into. Every time I sit down to work on my next project, I end up rereading, if not the whole thing, the last big chunk of what I wrote because I want to get back into that flow.
Yes.
And so, when I have my time that I set aside to try and work on this, I do the same thing as you do with the notes, and everything. But I have to immerse myself in what I was writing before to
Yeah.
pick back up where I left off. So I have to like allow time for the reading of it and to really get into it and reading. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of my litmus test. Like, am I ready to sit down and write and contribute? If I'm reading what I wrote and I'm getting lost, like, or my mind's wandering or something, I'm not ready. I'm not ready to sit down and start writing stuff. If I get back into it and I'm like, okay, I'm here. Let's go. Then the pen works. All of a sudden, ink comes out and things
Yeah.
happen, right? So, I mean, I appreciate you asking me that. Thank you. But
Yeah. Yeah.
very, very similar. I love that part of it. Now, I want to get this question right because it's a fictional book.
Yes.
But you already have included Pittsburgh, as one of the things
Yes.
that's in
Yeah.
your book in terms of a character, so to speak, and that it's one of the main locations. But the the themes that are in the book, okay, where you're talking about loyalty and betrayal and what happens when someone crosses the line, and one fracture in trust that causes a disagreement can, undo everything. I mean, these are themes.
Yeah.
Is this coming from Rodney? Some of
Yeah.
these themes? I mean, it sounds like there's some you in this wrapped in the characters.
Yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest thing that had happened with me writing it at 19 as opposed to me writing it at 56, right? Because now I have all this life experience to then go back and look at these characters and look at the themes and really expand it, right?
Hmm.
Because, being a leader, a coach, you have moral conflicts and obviously, being married. I think communication is probably the biggest thing in marriage, right? You need to communicate. And so I kind of like went with those, type of themes that I've experienced over my life to try and, say, okay, well, if I'm in the seat of this character, how would they react in this situation, right? Are they going to be brash or, male dominated kind of character, or are they going to be a strategic thinker and really think about the process? And what happens in this book is you have a disconnect. So these cartels were at peace for a long time, and you have a disconnect that they feel like the leader of the other cartel is who started this kind of turf war, when in fact it was one of his underlings.
Yeah.
So in one cartel, you have people not following the leader, right? In the other cartel, they're in lockstep. Even though they don't agree with what the leader's doing, they're still in lockstep. So, and that's what kind of creates the dissension and then causes this conflict. And you can learn a lot from conflict, right? Because it
Oh yeah.
reveals a lot of truths, right? So that's kind of like the premise that I worked off with was, my experiences, that I acquired over time. And I feel like if I would have put this book out when I was 19, it might not be as good. It might not be as well liked. And so I feel like those two different perspectives as a teenager as opposed to an adult that's done these leadership positions, coached kids, and one of the things that I used to tell all the kids, girls, boys, if you're coachable, you're employable, right? So
Oh
we're
yeah.
trying to help you, right? I'm trying to help you with technique. I'm trying to help you with how important ground balls are, for example, in lacrosse. They win games, right? If you can control the ball, you're controlling the game. So a lot of those messages kind of then translate into your life experiences, right? So that's kind of like the premise that I look back on.
Nice. Sounds like the cartels may have even been based in part on either some of your teams or some teams you played against. I'm just guessing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. That's a good pickup, but
I love
yeah,
it.
it's and different leaders, that you've experienced over the years,
Yeah, sure.
Um, so
Are you in the book?
I am not.
All
No,
right. There you
no,
go.
I am not.
Are pieces of you in the characters?
Yes,
All
actually,
right.
my female character has some traits of mine in there, which is, ironic. But that was the other thing is, you and I talked before this, but I have a daughter and I have a son. They're both in college. But my daughter, I really want them to feel like they could do anything, and I tried to instill this in the youth players that I coached, boys and girls, is once you put your mind to something, you can accomplish anything, right? So I wanted my two female characters, my lead character is Kylie, and then my FBI agent is Teresa. I wanted them to be strong, independent female characters. They're in a male-dominated world, right, with these cartels, but I really wanted them to be able to stand up to that challenge. So that was important to me.
I love that. I really do. I was going to ask you at some point, what do your kids think of the book? Because, I mean, hey, that's what every empty nester goes through, right? So have they had a chance to read it? And what do they think of it?
Uh, Ironically, neither one of them have read the full book. My son started it before it got published, and he read about 4 chapters, and he really liked it. Um, his idea, he actually had a twist in the book because originally, when I was at 19, I wrote it as if it was in Vegas and not Miami. And my son said, Dad, why don't you change the location to Miami? Because Miami is more prevalent for, cartels and, things of that nature. So that was a change that actually was my son's idea. That then I went back and I had to edit all the areas that I had in Vegas to Miami. So
Nice.
that was actually his idea, which happened early on in when I first, typed the information in from the notebooks.
Oh, that's great.
I,
All
I
right.
made an adjustment there based on his input.
Cool. I mean, usable feedback from your kids.
Yes,
That's
yes,
something. That's another accomplishment. So
yes,
congratulations on that too.
yes.
I,
And that's another thing. You mentioned feedback. That's another thing that I always talk about is to me, feedback is a gift, right? Whether it's negative or positive, if somebody takes the time to give you feedback, to me, it's a gift, right?
yeah.
Because they're showing you something that either you're not doing correctly or, you are doing correctly and it makes you feel good, right? But I think if you take feedback, and when I was coaching, I instilled this in the players is if I'm giving you feedback, listen, right? Because I'm not saying it just to say it, right? I'm saying it to try and help you in certain areas, right? Whether it's your hand technique in football, your footwork, hip turn, things. If I'm giving you feedback, listen, you know.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. That's definitely the coach in you. I mean, that's ringing in my ears like crazy. So I hear it. The I mean, I have to say congratulations again that you got feedback from your kids, though. I mean, I've done like 700, 800 podcast episodes. I think they've listened to five. You know? So, I mean, it really is a gift, like you're saying. Now, I also have a question about the publishing part of this because, I mean, we've kind of glossed over the fact that, you have a publisher, it sounds like, actual publisher, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So you got this book, it's sitting in a drawer in our filing cabinet someplace
Yep.
for 37 years. You pull it out and it's okay. Now I have to fill my weekends and I'm starting to rekindle my passion for writing. And like, this
Yep.
is a great story. But most of these stories, with all of that up until that point, more than likely goes to self-publishing, type of thing. How do you get it? How do you get to a publisher and get picked up like that? That's amazing.
Yeah. So, You know what I did was I had my wife who's an avid reader and then five other friends of ours that read a lot. I had them read it. They all loved it. So my wife and I were talking, hey, well, let's send it out, see what happens, right? And I'm thinking I'm going to get a bunch of no's. So I actually went on to Chat GPT. I had it run me a query of what publishers in the country take new authors with new ideas. It only came back with four. So then we sent it to
Mm.
those four, and then ended up with well, three of the four wanted it. The one turned it down within like 24 hours. I don't even know if they read the book. And then then we ended up with deciding to go with one. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing that a lot of the publishers they want your Tom Clancy's, your James Patterson's. They don't want new authors. So
Right.
I think I kind of got lucky. You know,
Luck works. I mean, that's fantastic. You still sent it out. Did you have to get a literary agent, a book agent?
I did not get a book agent, and
Oh,
I don't know if I'll need one moving forward. Maybe I could, offline ask you your thoughts, but I did not. I sent it to those. I had virtual calls. I had a couple phone calls, like follow-up calls with those places, and then we decided to move forward with one. Um,
wow.
so yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
clearly your book was meant to go out. Okay, you find it after 37 years, the whole process. This just was meant to be. So I
Thank
mean,
you.
that's amazing. It
It's
really is.
surreal, right? It's surreal. When
It
I go
is.
on Amazon, I still like my wife's like, you're like a little kid. But I go on to Amazon and I see my book on there. I still can't believe it. I'm like, I started writing this when I was 19 years old. It's on Amazon. You know what I mean? Like it kind of blows you away a little bit.
I'm sure, absolutely, especially after that. You have so many gifts that have come through this process for you, in that most of us, if we're writing something, in our 50s, we can't even remember our 19-year-old selves.
Yeah.
And most of us, if we're 19, we have no life experience to draw on, and no one anywhere is willing to voluntarily wait from 19 to 55 or 56
Right.
to go
Right.
ahead
Exactly.
to gain the experience and write the book. Nobody spends 37 years writing a book, right? It's just you had a unique situation. So you've been able to encompass all of this into the book. I assume that you feel like that's a pretty big advantage to you in this whole thing.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Rory. I think it's a huge advantage, right? Because I was able to then look at how my perspective was when I was a teenager, as opposed to after all this life experience, what my perspective is. And then I was able to adapt those together and weave stuff into the story or into the characters that I probably wouldn't have done if I would have continued writing at 19, because my perspectives have changed, my emotional intelligence has changed, right? My whole aura has changed over over time, right? So I think it's a huge advantage um, because I was able to make those adjustments, make those edits, add things that I probably wouldn't even have thought of, at 19,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Um,
So, I mean, now you've got a sequel coming because the publisher loves you so much that they want another one of these, which is fantastic.
yeah.
This is it going to be whatever you can tell us about it? I know it's under construction, and I would never ask anybody to give away the secret sauce. Is the intention to be a continuation of the story, or is it a new book, new characters, new things? I'm just curious about that, maybe.
So I actually have two thoughts, okay? And you give me your opinion. My sequel that I'm working on right now is a continuation of the story, okay? Then, if this first book does well, the third book, what I want to do is go back to the beginning
Oh,
of when
prequel.
my main character was a teenager
Oh
and
yeah,
the leaders of the cartels were in place already and what happened there. So that's kind of like my thoughts. So as I've been writing this sequel, as I get ideas for going back to the beginning, I have another Word document that I'm putting in ideas, oh yeah, that I like that. That
nice.
so that's kind of my thoughts moving forward is I want to have a continuation, but then I go back to the beginning. Okay, here's what happened before
Hmm.
Ascension. So So
I,
that's kind of like
wow.
where I'm at.
I mean, hey, I'll give you my opinion right now. Love it. Think it's a great idea.
Awesome.
So, especially if the first one does well. I mean,
Yeah.
and it takes a little while. I know it's doing well now, but in the end, if you look at it and go, yeah, that did well, right? We all evaluate based on our own metrics, but yeah, I think that's amazing. And you're ahead of me again, which is wonderful because you're the guy in the driver's seat here. I was going to ask you how the process is different, right? In the sequel, you're already talking about taking notes for the third one, which I'm guessing you weren't doing for the first one, taking notes for the
Oh,
sequel.
no, not
So
at all.
how does it differ in terms of what you're doing, the process, the whole nine yards, now writing a sequel to one that's out, and then even thinking about the third, which will be a prequel, which sounds like a whole different ball of wax.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what's different is as I'm carving out this time on the weekends, and like you had mentioned, if your mind's not in it, I think what I've been doing differently to keep me focused is even if I'm not writing new stuff, I'm looking at my old stuff and old chapters and making sure that things are succinct or the way that I want it, right? So either way, I'm working on the book, whether I'm coming up with new ideas, because sometimes, as your thoughts just aren't there, right? But I've carved that time out that's my appointment. So whether it's new ideas or whether it's editing the old ideas,
Mhm.
I'm doing it. But as far as the difference in how I'm writing this sequel is, as those other ideas pop about going to the prequel or to the beginning, I'm automatically, so I have both Word documents up. So if something pops in my head based on what I'm doing with the sequel, I'm automatically adding it into that third book document, so then I have it to go back on. And even like dialogue, like I've had a couple dialogue things that have popped in my head that I've thrown into that other document, like, hey, I like this. So it's been an interesting journey because it's a journey that I didn't think that I would go on, right? But I think the interesting underlying thing is that I could teach my kids is you never give up on your dreams, right?
Mm.
I started
Yeah.
writing this in 19. I'm 56 years old and now my book's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble and all these other places. You know, don't give up on your dreams. It's and obviously it's kind of like a hobby for me right now because I still have a while before I can retire. But it's
That's good.
fun and it keeps my mentality, going and doing stuff that I enjoy.
Yeah, I love your attitude towards it all. And even I hadn't really given that a lot of thought, the process of writing, a sequel. And then when you brought that up about writing a prequel after the sequel, because you've already done some prequel work in
Yeah,
terms of building the character out so that you can
yeah.
write the first book. And so now, is it just continuing that process, or is it like adding, flavor to it now? Maybe now you're adding dialogue to that person and a little more of the storyline.
Yeah.
How is going back to the third book, making it more exciting, writing the whole thing?
It is kind of more exciting because it actually changed a couple chapters in the sequel. My perspective of the prequel actually changed some of the things that I had already written in a couple chapters. And so then I went back and I'm like, well, I really like this in the third book. So I'm going to change these two chapters in this sequel because I think it's going to flow better than the third book. So
Nice.
yeah, so that perspective has really enlightened me to really delve into, hey, what did the beginning of this look like? And then how am I writing this sequel that I'm tying those together? So then, somebody hopefully will buy all three books and they'll see that link and they'll see that uh, storyline go.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, it's exciting but really challenging. And I'll share something with you that so in the sequel, I had this scene that literally is probably the hardest chapter that I've ever tried to write. Okay. And in the sequel, and this is behind the scenes stuff. In the sequel, um, I have a get together with all the law enforcement. And what the idea is they're kind of doing like a weekend retreat, like a work retreat. So my FBI agent gathers all the DEA agents, the police, my main character all together, and they're going to have a dinner, and then they're going to have a working session, you know? So starting to write that dinner scene, I've literally written that chapter, I want to say 15 times. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Because think of a dinner scene. You and I are just getting to know each other, right? So our conversation is totally different than maybe two people at a different place in the table are having that know each other, work together, those sort of things.
Right.
And and there's keys in this dinner scene that I want them to pick up on that then, say, oh yeah, connect the dots, right? This happened, and it would move the story forward. So I've moved people around in chairs, in all this process, moved people around where they were sitting, the whole 9 yards. Had different conversations, changed the conversations, rewrote it, changed my perspective. Okay. So I looked at it from a different lens because I knew where I wanted to go after this chapter. So I started writing that and I put that chapter aside. But then as I was thinking about it, I changed the perspective. Instead of them getting together for dinner and then having their meeting, I flipped it. I had them get together for their meeting and then have the dinner. And the reason for that is it's easier in a conference or in a meeting for people to introduce themselves in an open
Ah,
setting, and then everybody gets the perspective of what that DEA agent is doing or what that police officer is doing, those sort of things in a meeting than it is at a dinner table where you first meet each other. And
interesting.
then I have the dinner, which then they uncover those points that I wanted to uncover, and they put some dots together to move it forward. So just that little switch of the timing of those discussions made a world of difference for me.
I mean, I can only imagine as you're sitting here describing it to me, and I love the attention to detail, by the way. That's probably one of the things that's making this such a great book. But the idea that if you have the meeting first, that may also color, where somebody sits and how somebody feels about somebody, ahead of time before they even get to the dinner table. And yeah, you're right. It changes the entire dynamic when you think about it in real life. And
Yeah.
that's what you're trying to write. So that's amazing that you're diving into the detail that deeply. I got to know, is that something that you picked up along the way? Is that something that you found in a book or were taught? I mean, where does that come from? Because I
No,
don't hear that often from
I
folks.
picked it up from real life, right? Because when you think about you go to a work meeting, right? You do conferences or a work meeting or you meet with your region, whatever. You typically have the meeting first and then do the dinner, right? Not the other way around. And I was trying to do it the other way around, but if I just leaned on my experience,
Hmm.
it clicked, right? Because then I'm like, hey, now, like you had mentioned a point. I have some characters that they don't like each other, right? One of the DEA agents doesn't like one of the FBI agents, that sort of thing. And so there's a little bit of friction, right? So you have that friction in the meeting, in the conference, let's call it. But then, at the dinner table, I have them sitting next to each other, so because that happens in real life, right? You have a misunderstanding or miscommunication with somebody in real life, but then you get over it. You know, they're going to be sitting next to each other at the dinner table, even though they had the friction earlier in the day, and I think that real life experience kind of draws that in, you know.
I love it. No, I love it. I love the
I wouldn't have
process.
been able to write this at 19. This scene, I wouldn't have been able to write at 19.
No way. That's that life experience coming
Yeah,
back. A
exactly.
100%. No, that's just the gift that keeps on giving, man. That 37-year wait.
Yeah,
So
delay.
let me, I've only got a couple more questions for you. You've been incredibly generous with your time. I love the conversation and so thank you for everything you're
Oh,
contributing
absolutely.
today. But most of
Thank
us, when we
you.
Oh, absolutely. Most of us, when we go into the process of, writing, we have an idea. It's going to look like this. The book's going to be like this, so on. Granted, you started at 19 and then you pick back up. So maybe when you picked it back up and said, hey, now I'm going to really work on this, I'm going to take it over the finish line. Um, you have that image of how it's supposed to look, what you think is going to happen, and it never ends up looking that way at the
Right.
end. So I guess the question is, what surprised you? What was different, and what was maybe the biggest surprise in terms of what you expected going into it and how everything all ended up?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Rory, because I feel like my initial idea, even though I had, probably three-quarters of it, probably written or maybe a little less than that, the original idea that I had and how I felt like it would go isn't how it ended up because I changed the way that I was writing now at 56 than I did when I first started this. And obviously at 19, I didn't have those perspectives. I didn't have those life experiences, any of that. So what I did differently is now I write with not the end game in mind, but I let the story take me where it wants to take me, right? And I let the characters take me where I want them to go. And so I think that perspective, and I'm big on subplots. So I have a lot of like subplots in Dissension, and I have even more in the sequel where, smaller characters in the first book have a little bit more roles in the second book, but then they all weave together to like the main plot. But one of the things that I like about what I'm trying to accomplish is the fact that everybody in the book is meaningful, right? Every character is meaningful, even though they might be, a subordinate, they still have a story, right? So I think those little subplots that I'm working on really enhance the main story, but then it helps to bring those characters to light so they're not just a name, you know. It's not just Joe Smith or whatever, you know what I mean? It's Joe Smith that does this. This is what his family's like, stuff like that. Um, so I think taking the story where it's going organically has really changed my perspective on writing.
Great. I love that. That's wonderful. All right. Final question, man. Here we go. You are a published author, and congratulations for that. You're on your way to a sequel, and it sounds like maybe a prequel, which I can't wait to hear all about.
Thank you.
There are hundreds of people out there, thousands of people out there, millions of people out there who wish they could be authors, who wish they could get published, who wish they could pull something out of a drawer and get it done. What's your best piece of advice for authors who are not quite where you are in the author journey yet, who really want to be where you are?
I would say probably two pieces of advice. One is my mindset of making it a priority, right? Setting up a specific time that I have an appointment, like you and I had an appointment today, right? I'm ready to go, you know, ready to talk. I do that with the book. I have an appointment with my book because we're not going to be doing something on Saturday. I'm writing, right? So I think that perspective of, hey, make it a priority. If it's important to you, then make it a priority, right? A lot of people, I think, they want to do something, but they don't make it a priority, right? If they made it a priority, then they're going to accomplish it. And the other thing I think is one of the things that we touched on is if you do have a dream of wanting to do it, then keep working at it, right? Hard work gets the rewards, right? So you have to put that time in and put that hard work in, like in sports. You and I are big sports guys, right? You got to put the hard work in. Practice makes if you better on game day, right? If you didn't practice getting ground balls in lacrosse during the week, guess what? You're not getting ground balls in the game. If you didn't practice on your hand technique in football, you're not getting around the offensive lineman. You know what I mean? So you have to put that hard work in. And the book, I don't think is any different because, you're developing something. You got these ideas. So put the work in to get those ideas down on paper. Those would be my two probably biggest aha moments with accomplishing this.
I love it. I love it. I'm sure that's helpful to somebody, and man, it sure hits home with me. So
Thank
I
you.
hear you. I hear you loud and clear. All right, Rodney, as we close out, the best ways to reach you, find the book, the whole bit. Give us your contact info, and of course,
Yeah,
I'll put it all in the
so
show notes.
it's rodneyphillipsauthor.com is the website, and then it is available on Amazon and it's available on Barnes and Noble. It's also available on the publisher's website. And then feel free to email me. If people want to email me and ask questions or need help or want to just talk through stuff. I actually have a couple friends that after I, had gone through this journey, they're like, "Hey, I had an idea. You mind if I talk to you about it?" I'm like, "Sure, call me, or let's get lunch or whatever." So my email is rphillips66 for Mario Lemieux, obviously, big time Penguins guy, at yahoo.com. So, people can email me if they have questions or if they need some help with something, because I think the more that as authors you kind of take care of each other, because really when you think about it, we're really not competing against each other. We all want good stuff to be out there, right? And I want more people to start reading. Hopefully our conversation today has got some people more intrigued on picking up a book and reading. And I'm old school. I like to have the book. I like to have the hardcover book in my hand. So I think those are probably the perspectives that I'd like people to see is, hey, pick up a book. You never know
Nice.
what I'm at.
Nice. Hold that up for us one more time. Let's because we do have a video version of this podcast as well. So there it is. Dissension, that's the cover. You got it. There it is. You guys can all find it. All
You
right,
want me to
perfect.
tell you about the Easter egg on the cover?
Oh, yes, that's right. I almost forgot. I'm so glad you said that. Yes,
So
there is an Easter egg
obviously
on
I'm
the
a
cover.
big time football guy, right? A big time Pittsburgh guy. So on the front cover, I hid the Steelers logo, which, here's the Steelers logo. So I hid the red diamond above the building. I don't know if you could see it.
Yep. You go up a
And
little
then,
higher. We got it. Absolutely.
yep,
Oh, yeah.
right above this the building. Then the second yellow diamond is replaces one of the lights on the Pittsburgh bridge. So this blends in going across the bridge is the Pittsburgh bridge, which then blends into the Miami bridge, which subliminally creates that link between the two cities.
Gotcha.
The third diamond is a little bit harder to see, but it's a different colored blue that's in the river behind the Hitman. So that is kind of like an Easter egg that got the Steelers logo into the book.
There you
So
go. That's loyalty, man. That's loyalty to your fandom. I love that. I really do. That's fantastic.
yeah,
All right, folks, the author of Dissension, go pick it up. You have all the contact information in our show notes. Rodney Phillips. Rodney, thank you so much, brother, for being on today and sharing everything you did. I'm sure someone is getting some help out of this someplace, brother. I appreciate you.
appreciate you as well too, and thanks for inviting me to be on the show.
You got it. You got it. All right, folks. This has been another episode of the Right Path podcast, where the truth still counts and the keyboard calls us home. This is where this is the place where authors know that every page is a step forward. So let's lift each other up. Let's dust each other off and let's all move forward together.